Welcome to the Career Hub segment powered by the African Talent Company. Now, every week we'll be diving into issues about employment. We'll give you a 360-degree understanding of how Africa's labor market is shaping up, the trends that are driving it and will drive it, as well as the concerns and issues that face employers and employees across the continent. All of this will be done in partnership with the African Talent Company. Now, this week, our focus is on how to negotiate a salary raise. One of the most nerve-wracking moments of many people's careers is having that salary raise conversation with their boss or HR. If you've worked at a company for a while or you feel you've exceeded your performance expectations, you might consider asking your employer for a raise. And that's why we have a guest who's going to get straight into that. Joining me from Nairobi, Kenya is Hannah Kirira. She's head of recruitment for BrighterMonday Kenya. Hannah, welcome to Business Edge and welcome to the Career Hub segment. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure being here.
So let's look at this in terms of the negotiation. There's a lot of conversation. People often want raises, but they don't know how to go about it. And it's often very critical for you to not approach the conversation without being prepared. So what do I need to know about my industry, about my job role before entering into salary negotiations that will help me sort of be on the best foot to get a yes and definitely not a no?
Sure. Thank you for that question. So you find the first thing that you have to figure out before you get to any discussions around pay rise is your value. What's your value? That's a question that you need to ask yourself. And does the company see your value? But first, once you get to understand what's your value, you need to get to research on this topic. That is, of course, pay rise. So get to understand from similar industry, what are other people earning in the same sector, in the same role. Talk to your friends. Probably like you have friends who are working the same sector or in the same line. So get as much information as you can. So in this case, you need to talk to probably even you worked with. I'm assuming most people have worked or you interact with a recruiter. So you need to find that from them. What's the salary range for this position? Yeah. And how can I be able to get to be able to know what other people are earning in the same scope and within the same industry, within the same area. So once you get all this information, and again, also you also need to get to other salary tools like the Glassdoor or PayScale to still be able to back this information in one for you to be able to make a justification that you really deserve a pay raise. So. And again, once you have this information, then back your case. How do you back your case? How has been your performance for the past 1 year or for the past 6 years? Have you worked on any projects or any assignment or any technical project that really has brought a lot of value and contribution to the company? So in this case, have you been able to also to be able to talk to customers, or have you been able to increase the number of the customers that your company has been that in terms of the role that you're also assigned? And again, how have you been able to change people within the company? Like, let's say, for example, you have some people who report to you, or you have people who you work closely with. How have you been able to provide this support?
So sort of like a brag sheet.
Information that can help in terms of that discussion.
Okay.
So you can't just go blindly.
Very true. So I know some people call it a brag sheet for you to be able to note your achievements and what you've been able to add to the company for a while. So you mentioned 1 year, 6 years. I know part of this conversation is also when to have this conversation. Should it be a situation of when you've been confirmed and you're now a permanent employee? Is it 1 year later? Is it 6 months? What's sort of the timeline around having a conversation about asking for a salary raise?
So the first of all is, when you join the company, did you have anything set, or did you have discussions on when the company does the salary increments? So that's the first question you need to ask. Do they have a policy on when they do the salary increments? So ideally, the best time to ask for salary increment is after you've been in a tenure in the company for at least 1 year. I would suggest so. So in this case, especially towards the end of the year, you need to pick up the conversation. Give a track record of what you've done in that year. I have done this and this. Specifically, let's give an example. I worked on a project, or I worked on a project that managed to solve the business or change how we work or be able to bring the tech aspect into the company. So you need to be able to be very, very specific. And when you bring this to the table in the period that you worked on, if, let's say, for example, in the last six months, you can be able to build a case that can be able to help or be able to bring to justify as to the reason as to why you really deserve this salary increment.
Okay.
So 1 year, 6 months, or when the salary reviews are done, it's the best time to have the conversations, especially with your boss or even with the HR team.
Okay, so we'll get to that salary review part of the conversation.
Yes.
But one of the other things is, especially now, we've seen some companies who have given their staff raises because of inflation. They've taken into consideration the rising cost of living, and they're trying to make sure salaries and wages meet that. But not all companies are able to do that. But there's also a conversation about, do I take the financial position of the company into consideration when asking for a salary or when deciding to ask? So should I concern myself with sort of the company's financial health in this conversation?
Definitely. So look at it this way. Your company is going through a cost-cutting discussions. So is that the best time really to ask us pay rise? No. So you need to be aware of what's happening within your company. So how is the business performing? Ask your manager, ask the finance team, ask your HR, or ask your colleague. You really need to get the information. So you need to start the discussion the right time, and this the right time. It is when the company is flourishing. So if they're cutting down or they really didn't do well for the financial year, you need to factor that out, because most companies will only do a high salary increment only when they are doing very well, right? So when things are a bit shaky, or we're just coming from a season of Corona or the COVID-19 situation, so it's very skeptical, and you really need to find out how is the company performing, how are the financials. So these are discussions that you definitely need to first talk to the boss to have more information about before you go and position about a case on salary increments.
Okay. So you mentioned salary rise earlier, or salary review, I beg your pardon. And in most, with a properly structured system, it's almost an automatic conversation that will happen on a yearly basis. Do employees really need to negotiate, or should the process within a company be natural, depending on when you've joined and how long you've been with the company? What would you recommend?
So there are guiding policies that companies operate with. Yeah. So in this case, let's say, for example, in our company, you have a salary increase policy. So first, be aware of that. Secondly, once now you're aware about the policy, it might not be very natural that since we have a policy that guides that the salary can also be increased every annually, you will need to justify why, because they will probably consider the inflation rate for that specific country, and probably for them to be able to come up with a rate as to which one they'll be able to use, either the 6% or the 8%, or based on how the country is performing. But you will, if you feel like your performance, or you can be able to justify that your performance is way beyond the rate that the company provides, then you need to justify your case. You need to present your case. You need to have that discussion in advance, so that when the structure happens, or if the salary conversions happen towards the end of the year, you can have a better, more placed place to be able to justify that it's not just that I need a 7% increment, but I've done this and this and this.
And
I've contributed in this way. It's not more about being selfish, but of course you have to be able to showcase your accomplishment to the company. And if you get the salary increment, what else can I do? Or how else can I go beyond what has been set in place to be able to achieve even more to this company?
All right, Hannah, before I let you go, we would all love to hear yes in these conversations, yes to what we put down, but we know that that's not always the case. Sometimes companies will defer and say, wait 6 months and then we'll see what we can do. They might offer you alternative perks in lieu of an increase, or sometimes they'll just outrightly say no. Very briefly, what happens if your employer says no? What decisions do I need to take as an employee asking for that raise? And the answer I hear is no. Very briefly.
The first thing, you have to remain calm. That's the first thing. Once you understand, then after because you can't bring your emotions into the discussion, so you have to be remain very, very calm. Then after that, you will need to ask why. Why is it not the right time? Like, for example, if your HR gives a reason, or your boss gives a reason, this is not the best time for us to be able to review your salary. So you need to ask the question, why? Then they'll be able to give you the reasons. Most likely it could be a business performance issue, or the way you presented your case, you might have assumed that you've achieved your deliverables, but your boss has a different opinion. Then if once you get to really get to the answer why, then ask, then you will be able to know, then when can you be able to pick up this conversation? Probably in 6 months' time, can you have the same conversation? In 1 year's time, can you have the same conversation? Then after you're done with that discussion, document it so that you have a reference place.
And you have a timeline.
Because it might not necessarily be a yes now, but it can be yes tomorrow, or 6 months, or 1 year. So you have to be open-minded that the answer can be no, or maybe it might not necessarily be the figure that you asked for, but maybe a slightly lower figure, but not right now, but maybe in the next 1 year, or in the next 6 months, or a time period. It's good that by the time you're getting to that discussion, have a definite timeline as to when this conversation is going to work, and then have very clear deliverables or KPIs or goals that you need to achieve in that period. And then have it set clearly that if you've achieved this, then I should be able to get this in return.
All right, Hannah, thank you so much. I know there are a few people taking notes on this. The conversation around cost of living and salary rises is one that is endless, but we do appreciate your time today. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you as well. So it's a pleasure having this discussion with you. Thank you so much.
All right, enjoy your day.